Welcome to the Higher Ed Athletics Podcast with Travis Smith. Today, I'm joined by Bubba Cunningham, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Director of Athletics. Bubba, thanks for being on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the visit.
Yeah, well, we talked about just before recording this. You've been busy, and so I appreciate the time, and we're going to get into some questions here. You know, I'm always fascinated by career paths, and you were a student and a longtime senior administrator at the University of Notre Dame. You then served as the AD at both Tulsa and Ball State University before getting to Chapel Hill. So a couple stops in Indiana. So that's always good to see. But I'm curious, what did you learn in your experiences at Notre Dame as a member of the senior staff that you think helped you when you became an athletic director at Tulsa and Ball State?
Well, I really had a great experience at Notre Dame for a long period of time, and I actually started my career there in the Alumni Association, and I think that was really has been the foundation of the principles and values that I've brought to intercollegiate athletics. My job, there were 200 clubs throughout the country, and I was responsible for being the principal liaison with one of them. And so I was with 100 of them, and then the other person had the other 100. And I really learned about the breadth of the university, and I learned about the service to those who had gone to the university and wanted to come back and stay connected. And so that really serves as, so then I switched from there into athletics. And then when I got into athletics, we were just starting a marketing program. So I was in marketing for a while. Then I went into the ticket office, was in ticket operations for a while. We started a mail order business of logoed merchandise. Then I switched out of there and went into, associate AD for finance and facilities, and then did some externals. So over that almost 20-year period between the student alumni work and the athletic department, I had seen so many different parts. And every one of those stops were helpful. And again, it is how, and so my philosophy is, how does an athletic department enhance the value of the university? And so when I went to Ball State, I created a mission for intercollegiate athletics at Ball State that I used, which is the mission for intercollegiate athletics at Ball State at the time when I was there, is that we enhance the educational experience of all the students. And it wasn't just about the ones that played. It was about thinking about their experience, those that play in higher ed, and thinking about what kind of reputation are we helping create for the school because of our athletic program and attracting those other students to come. So that was really the foundation of the principles and values of how I try to manage and lead a department today.
Well, and I'm sure this is kind of an extension of that, but what did you take with you to North Carolina? Did it change when you go from being an athletic director at a Tulsa or Ball State to then all of a sudden you're leading, one of the most high profile athletic brands in intercollegiate athletics? Does your style have to change, or can you really just take that mission and that understanding of how you use that philosophy and just expand it?
Yeah, I think the mission, the philosophy, and the values are transferable, but how you manage and how you lead is very different. We have 28 teams, 800 student athletes here. At Tulsa, we only had 19 teams, and we only had about 350 student athletes and a much smaller staff, maybe 125 people on staff, including all the coaches. Here, we're about 250 full-time people. So the staff meetings, the communications to the department, the values that you're trying to instill in everybody, it's more structured. There's more formal communications and fewer informal interactions than there used to be at the smaller schools. But what I have, there's two common things of every one of the schools. So now I've been with 2 public, 2 private, 2 national, 2 regional. And what I see, there's 2 common things. One is, nobody ever thinks they win enough, no matter how many times you win something, and nobody thinks they have enough money. And so once you kind of get over that hump, look, we're all going to want more. Everyone wants more of what they have and what they think they need. And so our idea is, how are we going to be most effective and efficient with what we do have? And how do we always talk to people about the things that we have, and not what we don't have? And I've always been of the mind that if somebody comes into my office and says, we don't have the following things, therefore we can't be successful, that's a sign that either they're not very good at their job or they're not resourceful enough to help figure out a way to get the resources they need to be successful. And those are obviously different levels depending on the school. But to me, it all comes down to your attitude and how you approach the challenges that are there. And the people that are the most successful never think about what they don't have. All they think about are the things that they do have and how those things are going to help them win.
Yeah, it's interesting because I just had the Gonzaga athletic director on my podcast, and we were talking about their philosophy of, obviously they've had this growth with athletics, but I asked him about women's basketball because they're very successful too, and he was telling me when things started, we weren't winning and no one was showing up to the games, and same with some other sports, and he said we could do a rebrand, but you got to find a way to win. To get more resources. You can't just rebrand and all of a sudden resources appear. So that it's basically the same thing, like try and find a way to win, and then the more resources will come. But also, I come from small private institutions and regionals. So I was at University of Indianapolis and then Indiana State University. And so I understand the limited resources, but it's also good if you work in an athletic department there because you get to explore so many things, probably similar to how you did at University of Notre Dame.
Absolutely. And when I started at Notre Dame, we were a small department and it was starting to grow. And so I got a lot of different experiences. And I will say for the young people at both Ball State and Tulsa, they had more broad experiences than a young person at the University of North Carolina, because they kind of get slotted into an area and there's a lot of specialization when you have a big staff. And so the broad-based opportunities are really something that's special. So I've enjoyed both experiences, and I can see pros and cons. And some people like the big schools, and and some want to have the broader experiences. But they're both beneficial in their own way. But I happen to like being having worked in so many different departments and be more of a generalist than somebody that's so specific that they're really good at one thing.
Definitely. Well, I spoke to Charlotte Athletic Director Mike Hill on the podcast recently too, and he mentioned that the athletic directors in the UNC system sometimes speak, and they do have a good working relationship. I'm not sure I tried to tell the listeners, how big the D1 membership is in the University of North Carolina system. It's incredibly large with a lot of different universities. And so I'm curious, how did the relationship of system ADs start with communication? What type of things do you all kind of lean on each other for or discuss? I'm guessing maybe if an athletic director needs to know, about state policies that might be coming up soon, or just maybe even with the coronavirus, with your locales being similar, what kind of stuff do you all kind of talk about?
Well, it's interesting. When I first got here almost 10 years ago, we had a meeting at the system office with all the ADs, and that one really had a lot to do with insurance and how we're going to provide insurance coverage for all of our student athletes across the different campuses. And then for some reason, that meeting, we haven't held it in the last 9 years. But when the pandemic hit and we started thinking about how are we going to react as a school, we started having more conversations across the system. And Kim Record at UNC Greensboro and Janet Cohn at UNC Asheville and I were having a conversation, and we said, we should probably try to get everybody back together to talk about, can we play? Do we play regionally? And how's all this going to work? And that spurred a conversation with the rest of the system ADs. And John Bruner on our staff, who's our associate AD for all the game management, game operations, he's been leading that call, and we still do it monthly. And Rick Steinbacher is another person on our staff who's been very engaged with that group. And so we're trying to stay more connected. We have vastly different resources, but we have a commonality of we're all governed by the system and we're all within the state. And so we get on and we try to share our best practices. And at times we have more resources than some of the other schools. And so the documentation and some of the presentations and things that we put together, we certainly share it with everybody so they can adapt it to their own school and then use the same principles, particularly when it relates to 6-foot distancing and all of the entrance and egress requirements, the queuing up in lines for restrooms and concessions. We found that to be particularly helpful to some of our sister schools.
Yeah, I was for one of my projects, my doctoral program is kind of had to look outside the box a little bit. And I was thinking about I went to an undergrad school in the IU system, and now I work at another IU school. Just thinking about systems, and it was around the time I was interviewing Mike, and I was curious if whether it's apparel contracts or purchasing power of other things, if a system school could more share the resources to help out the smaller D1s of part of the system. And I think that the North Carolina one's probably a hard one to do that just because there's so many, and you have Power 5 schools, you have pretty much every level of D1. But what would you think about that idea? It sounds like you guys are already sharing some type of resources. Is there anything that maybe we could share and help out with systems of oversight of athletics that maybe we just haven't in the past?
I think best practices, and I think, in fact, I just completed an academic report yesterday that everybody in the system is required to report to the system. They aggregate all the information and then distribute it publicly. But revenue sharing from a financial resource issue is going to be hard to get to. I mean, we are in a revenue sharing model within the university, but sharing within the system, I don't see that happening too broadly, because we're all trying to figure out what's the best way to support our programs. And in fact, I'm struggling with that financially long term with name, image, and likeness and the other things that could impact the revenue streams that we have coming in right now. And what does that look like going forward?
Yeah, just trying to think even about name, image, and likeness is just trying to figure out, until there's policy out there, it's just so hard to figure out, but there's so many unknowns. And I know you spoke about it in the past, as well as there's a different athletic director or president speaking about it every day. And I'm sure you all are ready to try and get some policy together. Throughout your career, how did you build good working relationships? We're talking about the system, but at the university level, you've worked with several different presidents or chancellors. How did you actually develop those strong relationships over your career? And what would your advice be for athletic directors that are either new athletic directors or they're associate ADs working their way up to kind of get a good relationship with their institutional level leaders and really earn that trust to maybe eventually become part of his or her cabinet?
Well, to start with, I do think it's based on just my fundamental beliefs in the athletic programs in the educational environment. I mean, I sincerely believe that we enhance the educational experience of the students. They want to come to a place and have pride in their athletic programs. And our athletic programs have to reflect what the university is all about. Our facilities do, our game presentations do, our coaches do, our teams do. We have to make this place better. We're not the heart and soul of a university. Education is the heart and soul of a university. Research is the heart and soul of a university. We are something that is really visible, and it's a great piece of the university, but we're not the fundamental reason we exist. And so really at Ball State and Tulsa really is when I started to fully understand that. And you have big brands like Notre Dame and North Carolina, but if you're not making the school better because of your athletic program, you shouldn't exist. And so I think when you fundamentally believe that, I'm over on campus doing as much as I can to align our athletic department with the rest of campus. The president and the chancellors of these universities has incredibly difficult jobs. They have all the faculty issues. They have all the student issues. They have all the legal issues. They have, in our case, we have a medical school and a hospital. And so we can't be a drain on them emotionally, financially, or any other way. We have to enhance the experience here. So recognizing that, communicating that back to our staff as well, I think is critically important. And then from a real practical standpoint is find out who your president and chancellor is and what's important to them, and keep providing the information to them to the very best of your ability. And there's going to be a certain way that they want to meet. There's going to be a way they want to communicate. There's going to be information that they're going to want to have. And you have to try to discern what is that and how do I give it to you? Because everything we do over here, we need to be totally transparent and say, here it is. If we're not doing something right, you let me know and we'll fix it and figure out a better way to do it. But all we're trying to do is make Carolina better.
Well, it was early on in the podcast. I think the first episode I had Ross Bjork on, and from Texas A&M, and he was in that transition of Ole Miss to Texas A&M, and I asked him a similar question, and he said he makes it a point that everyone in his senior team likely has a counterpart for the institution on campus that does a similar role, whether it's compliance and legal and things like that, marketing. And he encourages them to actually find out who your comparative peer is on campus and, have a conversation with them and something like that. And I thought that was a great idea too. And there really is a lot of comparable jobs, especially at the larger institutions where you could actually have those connections.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I appreciate you telling me that. I won't tell Ross, but I'm going to steal that.
Hey, you guys are in different conferences, so you can steal it. Well, so let's kind of stick here with the college presidents. I think a lot of the people that listen are in that deputy or associate AD path. That's why I do ask some of these questions, and I'm curious about it too as someone that studies athletic directors. And you've worked with higher education administration for decades. What do you think those college presidents and chancellors are actually looking for in a prospective athletic director? Is it, you look at this from different institutions. You've mentioned how many different types of institutions you've been at. Do you think that there has to be a certain fit at an institution to match the candidate's background or their philosophy? And what do you think those people are looking for? Because they might hire a consulting group to help with that, a search firm, but at the end of the day, they're making the decision along with the board.
Right. I think that every single hire that we all make, presidents included, you're expecting competency in their job. And what you're looking for is chemistry. Can I get along with this person? Is this person at the AD level? Can I get along with everybody else, all the other vice chancellors, vice presidents that are going to be in the staff meeting? And I think that's critical. I don't know when you were at University of Indianapolis, but, Dr. Beverly Pitts was our provost at Ball State. And then she became the president at the University of Indianapolis. And she was wonderful to work with. And I do believe that it's just recognizing kind of where the athletic program fits really helps. But you do have to figure out who that person is that you're reporting to and make sure that there's a good working relationship with that individual. But trust and respect, and obviously the number one thing, you have to have personal integrity so that you line up with the values of the institution. And I think that's, and again, you got to be able to communicate. So as soon as there's an issue, they don't want to hear about it in the newspaper, and they certainly don't want to hear about it from one of their coworkers. So you need to be straight up and say, hey, these are the things that are troubling me that's going forward, and here are the things that we're doing well. But don't be afraid to communicate the challenges early.
Yeah, and then in addition to leading one of the most established brands athletic departments, you also serve on numerous committees, I'm sure throughout your entire career. I'm curious, with everything going on right now, what keeps you motivated to kind of address and solve some of the biggest problems that are coming up in college athletics, whether it's NIL or just college athletics after the pandemic? What keeps you motivated to address those?
I really, really believe in the athletic experience based in education, whether it's elementary, middle school, high school, or college. And obviously I'm working in the college space right now. And I think what we provide in scholarships and opportunities for kids to get a degree, to play a sport, maybe go professionally, or get a degree and go into another profession. Whatever that is, that's what motivates me. I'm also motivated right now for a couple of other things. One is, how do we keep kids in youth sports? Because that is the pipeline to college. It's also the pipeline to this educational experience through a scholarship. And I'm fearful that with the cutting of funding at the national level, cutting of funding at the high school level, we're going to see a drop in sports. I think the drop in sports has also led to health care problems within our country. I think the obesity rates that are higher than they've ever been, kids are dropping out and not having that physical experience. And I think that it is a bad plan long term. And so keeping sport embraced in education and keeping those opportunities alive is what's motivating me now, because I really value what you learn in the intercollegiate experience. It's that preparation, it's the competition, it's the evaluation of your performance, it's being critiqued, it's being judged. Those things will serve you exceptionally well when you get into the workforce. The motivation, the teamwork, the camaraderie, and all those things that are, co-curricular activities that we engage in are really helpful things outside the class, but your actual performance is something that is going to be with you the rest of your career as other people judge your performance in the workplace. So I think there's great value there. I think the physical nature of sport is better for a healthy society. All those are the things that really motivate me every day.
Does it get frustrating as a leader who's, you've dedicated your life to your professional life to college athletics, and really since you ended up graduating college, you've been in the space, to have motives questioned by a lot of people that work in athletics when you just talk passionately about why you think this? I imagine it probably gets frustrating at times when people think that those things don't matter to leaders. Or you just pass the frustration and you just kind of look past it.
Yeah, everybody has a different opinion, and some people have different motivations, and but that's mine, and that's what I care about, and I try to work every day to create a great environment for our coaches and our students to be successful. And I recognize that some people agree, some disagree, some are skeptical, some aren't, but that's fine. They're certainly entitled to their opinion, and I've got all these that I'm worried about, and I want to make sure I do a great job for North Carolina. And if I can help others, that's even better.
Well, with so many changes coming to the industry, it's kind of similar to what we were just talking about. As someone that's, I study, I like to look at research, but I also am a practitioner. I sometimes see a disconnect between scholarly work facing our field, whether it's sport management or higher education research. And I'm curious if you see that, if you see a disconnect, how do we fix that so that we don't always need a consulting group? Maybe we can leverage the brain power on college campuses to help solve problems.
Well, it's a great question. And it's one that we wrestle with from time to time, but we have an incredible athletic training program, and our exercise and sports science professors are outstanding, and they are really good at research. And so we've been challenging ourselves. How do we take all of this research on the health and performance of our student athletes and take it and apply it so we have fewer days of missed practice and fewer competitions? And so we've been working very collaboratively with the exercise and sports science to try to come up with that. And our group, the exercise and sports science faculty members, have been working with the NCAA to track data on a national basis, and so that we can be more collaborative and compare data and then figure out best practices to ensure that our kids are doing things that remain healthy and safe for them. And so that's just one example that I think we do pretty well here. And trying to, as you say, trying to make the research really relevant today, not 2 and 3 years after it gets published.
Yeah, because I think a lot of researchers, especially I think they're motivated to solve real issues, but I think one of the problems that I'm trying to investigate, I'll have a couple of researchers here on the podcast soon to ask, but I think one thing is the requirement of publishing so much so fast and trying to get a publication submitted, that I worry if that means that you're not going deep enough on a problem, you're not spending enough time asking people if you're studying the right problems. So that's something that, a lot of people want to be an athletic director. My goal, I'm not shutting that out ever. I'm still relatively young in my career, but I really want to tackle, from an academic standpoint, practitioner-based problems in college athletics and higher education. And that's a big reason why I did the higher ed doctoral program and my master's in athletic administration, that I just worry that sometimes the pressure to publish limits what you actually study. Are you studying the right things or not? And I think that part of that is building the relationship between athletic directors and scholars on their own campuses, instead of being, worried about what their motivations are, academics versus practitioners. I think, there's a lot of brain power on these college campuses, yours and mine especially.
Yeah, sure are. And it's one really neat thing that we do here is any, the IRB, when you have to get your IRB approval to study student athletes or have student athletes participate in your study, I don't mean study student athletes, we get to review those. And so what that does is it triggers in my mind, hey, somebody's doing some research on this area. I'd like to see the results. I'd like to understand it and then try to take that research into some applicable field. So being able to review the research and have a better idea of what's coming down the pike, I think has been really helpful to me, and helpful, particularly in the, as I mentioned, the health and safety standpoint in that area for us.
Well, Bubba, my last thing to ask is, is not something I scripted out. I'm just kind of curious about with everything going on. How does a leader manage so many things going on at once? I'm guessing you rely heavily on a strong team that you trust, but just with everything going on no one asked for the pandemic. NIL is busy, and you just hired a legendary basketball coach, retired, and you just hired a coach. How do you and your peers actually handle all that so well?
Well,
at least it looks well from the outside, I guess.
Well, thank you. We have a great staff. To a person, and we are big. And I actually apologized to our staff the other day, because when you're going through a very public search like this, I'd like to involve all of my direct reports. And there's probably too many. I have 13, and I couldn't do that. So I had to use some of them. But every single person that worked directly with me was really good at what they did. No one ever asked about doing more than what I was asking them to do. And nobody that wasn't involved in the process complained that they weren't involved in the process. So I couldn't be more proud of our staff and how they supported the decision, the way we conducted the search. And I also talked to the staff about every search is different. We've conducted a number of different searches. Sometimes we use a search firm, sometimes we don't. Sometimes I involve more people, sometimes I don't. This one was so specific. We were going to go so quickly. And the other thing that really stood out in my mind, and I try to explain to our staff, is there's a governance process as well. So in addition to me working closely with our chancellor, the chancellor had to work very closely with our board of trustees, and we had to work within our community to figure out where we were going next. So we had really good governance. We had clear communication. And I think we got to an incredible result because everyone trusted and was okay with their role that they played in the process. And then we tried to debrief a little bit after the fact to say, okay, here's some things that we did, and here's some things maybe we could improve going forward. But I could not be more pleased with the process and how that worked out. And it was because we have such good people, and people really understand that we are trying to do the best for them. And my feeling is, we want everybody to be successful. Our staff members, our coaches, our students, and I think we've kind of built that culture.
Yeah, I watched your press conference with the media before the search started, and you had mentioned that you were in Indianapolis in the bubble and you had to leave, but you couldn't tell your assistant why you were leaving, but you needed a flight back, and so the whole process, I understand. I bet that's almost so challenging and frustrating. You have to keep it so secretive, but my wife works in private aviation, so I know crazy people like to track planes, tails and stuff like that. So that's one thing to do, but. Bubba, I appreciate you being on the podcast. I did lie. I have one final question I'm starting to ask people is just any final advice for the prospective listeners out there that, they think they want to be athletic directors. Maybe they don't. I think a lot of people, I saw a tweet the other day, but that was really encouraging. It says, it's okay to want to be an athletic director. It's also okay to not be an athletic director and, work in athletics and just enjoy that ride. And that's kind of where I'm at, where, I could work at this university for, 20 years and I'd be super happy without ever being at AD somewhere. Some people don't want to move all the time. But what's your advice for those people that are aspiring to some level of athletic administration?
Well, it fits me perfectly. I love sports. I love working in higher education. I love working in an educational environment. But I guess my advice, if you will, would be, don't chase a title. Really try to do what you like to do. People have asked me frequently if I had a dream job. They were probably more asking me that before I got to North Carolina. But and I said, no, I don't have a dream job. But my career goals and my career ambition has always been, and it's pretty darn simple. I want to do what I like, where I like, with people I like. And I feel like if I can hit those, I'll be very happy, very satisfied with what I'm doing. I happen to be doing that in one of the greatest places in the country that is allowing us to compete for national championships, provide great educational experiences for kids. So I'm hitting all three of those right now. So the happier you are, the more successful you're going to be at whatever you choose as your profession.
Bubba Cunningham, thanks for being on the Higher Ed Athletics podcast.
Thank you, Travis. Appreciate it. And I hope you have a great day.